Wagi jika khalsa, wagi jika fateh. Okay, so this is the fun bit on Saturday night where we officially open the camp, and we have some special guests with us and a keynote speaker. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ramneek, who is going to introduce our official guest for tonight. Thank you.
The introduction before the introduction. Always
Yes.
love that part. Thanks. I'm here to introduce Michelle Rowland. I'm not sure if, well, the guys that have been here before will probably have some acquaintance with Michelle. I've seen you at various SYA events before, so I'm sure that a lot of the guys here before have met with you before. But for the first timers, I'll give you a brief sort of introduction to Michelle. And so, as Ash outlined earlier, Michelle is a Member of Parliament for Australia. She's Uppany. She's from Glenwood, the Bind, as we know. Yes, see, there you go. And she's the Federal Member for Greenway, and that's just her day job. By night, she's actually the mother of Octavia, which also happens during the day, but she's busy with running the country as well. A few other things I think specific to SYA are that I know Amy, my sort of partner in crime, was actually nominated for the NSLF by Michelle, and I can definitely say that it's made a big impact on him, so thanks for doing that. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other people thank you for that too, including his dad. I also know that Michelle's very thoughtful, because every year SYA receives a card on Vaisakhi from Michelle, and that's not something that you see from a lot of people, and I think that's a reflection of your character. And finally, some of you guys may have seen earlier this year that for the first time Julia Gillard actually visited the Parkview Gurdwara, and I think that's the first Prime Minister to ever visit a Sikh Gurdwara. So I think that was a monumental event in Australian Sikh history. So without further ado, Michelle.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. I want to acknowledge everyone who's here today, people whom I've come to know, and including people who are quite senior in the Sikh community. So it's great to see you all. It's a pleasure to be here as well. I was saying to Satwant and Sarampal, I can't believe it's 12 months since the last one. And if you think that it's hard coming from Glenwood trying to find your way around Narrabeen during the day at this camp, try it at night. It's even better. But did manage to find my way here, and it is great to be here again. I've never seen so many onesies in one room, so it's a pleasure to behold. And you must feel really ripped off. You're here on camp, you might be on holidays, and there's people are telling you you're not partying tonight. Ash has been a real downer, Gulab Jaman, at midnight in one another's rooms. And I just found out one of them is apparently equal to 6 Mars bars, one of those balls. And usually you eat 2, don't you? I actually think it's a global anti-Gulab Jaman conspiracy. Someone tweeted it. Someone tweeted it that he became fat. So it was probably these app guys, these app guys here, Dev Rules or whatever it said down the bottom there, Gee. But anyway, firstly, it was lovely to be here, if for no other reason than I always feel good when I come here. People say nice things to me, including the young ladies who just mentioned earlier, just with a couple of little words saying, actually, I find your speech is really inspiring. Well, and I really meant it when I said it's the nicest thing anyone's said to me all day. I've had a pretty rough day. We're getting into campaign season. Those of you who sort of follow politics, or even if you don't want to follow politics, you might have gathered. So my days, now that Canberra's officially over for this parliamentary season, my days are sort of spent pretty much campaigning full time now. Which takes a lot out of you. You're doing everything from railway stations, which mean I have to get up at about 4:30 on a weekday to do those. And then moving on to shopping centres and door knocking, and so they're pretty long days. And today was a pretty long one as well, especially when I had a not very nice person come up in my face and tell me, what she thought I should do, and they didn't include anything complimentary. But I was saying to Sarah Poll's mum, the hardest thing, people ask me what the hardest thing is about being a Member of Parliament. Probably the hardest thing is being able to turn the other cheek and actually not say what you think, because in this age, everyone's got an iPhone, or everyone can record and immediately disseminate what you've said. So not being able to say what you think is probably the hardest bit. But you know what, I can put all that aside me this evening and actually have a chat to you about a few things I've been thinking about. And I did take the time to write a few things down, so you'll bear with me. I'm not going to speak for very long. I like to take questions, those of you who have been here before. So firstly, I want to congratulate all the organisers of today and all the very special guests who make this camp such a great camp. And seeing the sort of things that you produce, the sort of entrepreneurial spirit that's in the room, and not only entrepreneurial in the sense of self, but entrepreneurial in the sense of world. I really don't know of any other forum that does this. So congratulations on putting together another very successful event. And I've had the privilege of knowing Satwant and many people in this room over many years, and the positive contributions that you make to our community. I really mean it, I'm not just saying it. And I know that those of you who've been coming here for a while, not only my sponsored soldier, but those of you who've been coming for a while will know, I think, the transformative effects it has. So what I thought I might chat about tonight is the concept of democracy and what it means to young people, our future leaders. And I'm very keen to get your feedback on these things. The reason why I thought about doing this is because of a few world events that are happening as we speak, but also we've just had released the 9th annual Lowy Institute poll, and it has some pretty disturbing findings. I think they're disturbing. It was conducted between the 4th and the 20th of March this year, and these are some of the things it found. Only 59% of Australians say that democracy is preferable to any other kind of government. So I don't know what the other 41% are thinking, but that was 59%. More than 1 in 8, or 13%, say that for someone like me, it doesn't matter what kind of government we have. So 13% really don't care what kind of government they have. And less than half, 48%, of 18 to 29-year-old Australians say they prefer democracy over any other kind of government. So less than half of that young cohort would prefer democracy. So I actually thought I was reading the stats wrong. That according to these figures, young Australians value the democracy less than their counterparts in Indonesia, which is an emerging democracy, India, which is a newer democracy than ours, and Fiji, which isn't democratic at all. So I started to think about this, and what does it say about apathy? Firstly, I thought about the obvious, apathy. But on reflection, I think that it's a sign that we do take our democracy for granted. And I think that that's a very dangerous thing. I think it's very dangerous to take anything for granted, but certainly in a democracy, I think it's a dangerous thing to take for granted. So why do we do that? Those of you who are as old as me, as young as me, would, I think, to borrow a Pink Floyd lyric, comfortably numb. A lot of people, I think, might be comfortably numb. We live in one of the most peaceful and prosperous countries in the world. We complain that we have an unemployment rate that's got a 5 in front of it, as opposed to a country like Spain, in which I think 88% of young people are out of work. We've got a relatively stable political system, and as some of us were discussing overnight, even we've just finished the hung parliament, the first hung parliament in our lifetimes here, and it actually passed a record number of pieces of legislation. So it was actually the most efficient parliament in Australia's history. We respect the rule of law, and according to the OECD, apparently we're the happiest country on earth. The happiest country on earth. We care more about the winner of MasterChef than who wins political debates. Maybe not so much MasterChef anymore, it's sort of been overtaken a bit by The Voice and those shows. We're transfixed by celebrities. We're transfixed by gossip and probably what's on our Twitter feed. And we're probably pretty disillusioned by the current crop of pollies in Canberra. And of course I don't include myself in that crop. But we probably are pretty disillusioned with what is on offer really at any level of government in Australia at the moment. But that doesn't stop us being happy and having stable government. And I did notice, speaking of tweeting, I did notice before coming here today that Justin Bieber tweeted the following 4 words: work hard, play hard. Justin Bieber. And this little tweet, fairly innocuous tweet, was pretty popular, and it got 112,000 retweets. 112,000 retweets. And he probably thought he thought that up himself. Then I got to thinking, perhaps we're just too comfortable, or perhaps the behaviour of politicians, maybe we've turned young people off. Maybe we've turned young people off. We've probably maybe turned off young people from even engaging in the political system. And maybe that's reflected in the Lowy Institute poll. But when we look around the world and we see constant struggles to achieve democracy, we see really how valuable some people, the value that people place on democracy. And one case in point, of course, as we speak right now, is Egypt. And the unrest that we're witnessing is perhaps it's a natural occurrence, perhaps when democracy supposedly bloomed, we thought, oh, you know, maybe this isn't going to be the happiest ending. I mean, these are people who couldn't exercise a free vote for over 3 decades under President Mubarak. They're in a transition to some sort of democratic governance. And I heard people, and you may have heard them too, getting interviewed, you know, why would you overthrow, you know, what led to you overthrowing a democratically elected government? And one of the answers was, well, they may have been democratically elected, but they weren't governing democratically. Is that a difference? I'll put that to you. In 2011, we had a situation where Muslims and Copts, Islamists and secularists were all united in their opposition towards Mubarak. And an Australian academic, Yasser Morsi, wrote, 2 years ago, as Tahrir were filled with millions calling for the end of a dictator, Egyptians knew that the 3-decade rule of Mubarak was over. They were no longer afraid. It was not simply that Mubarak had lost legitimacy, at another level a people were born. But today we see how rocky the road to democracy can be, with the differences between these Egyptians being exposed in dramatic fashion, and now we've got the military intervention and the ousting of President Morsi. And I think it's a difficult reminder about how fragile democracy is. And I can't help but feel that young Egyptians would be probably disgusted at some of the apathy shown by young Australians towards democracy here in our own country. And I would put it to you, this is why everyone should be engaged rather than disengaged. I know how popular and how common it is to argue, you know, people, and it's a word that's, I even use it. People say, oh, how are you finding it when you're out campaigning? And I say, oh, look, people are disengaged, they're disengaged. You know, what does that mean? What does that mean? They don't want to talk, they don't want to enter into an argument, they don't want to even try and prosecute a case or defend a case or even have an opinion. And unfortunately, many of these people, I believe, have a responsibility to be engaged, because more than ever, young people in Australia never been better educated, never had greater access to technology, never been wealthier. But unfortunately, many Australians, many of them young, and maybe some of you in this very room, are missing from the electoral roll. not only do you feel a sense of apathy, but so apathetic that you either aren't on the roll. And remember, in the United States, remember President Obama's big campaign is, get on the roll. All this, get on the roll. People have to, because it's voluntary voting. You've got to register and get them on the roll. In Australia, typically we haven't had to do that because you automatically get on the roll in many cases when you turn 18, or you can actually register yourself, but you're not eligible to vote even when you're younger. But for many people, every year, thousands and thousands of people just drop off the roll. You've moved, you've gone overseas for a long time, you've come back. And the AEC estimates, so the Australian Electoral Commission, that over 500,000, or greater than 1/3 of the estimated 1.4 million eligible Australians aged 18 to 25 are missing from the roll. 500,000 young people. And with a federal election just around the corner, and a very important one, it's crucial, I think, that everyone is enrolled to vote. So if you're not on the roll, or you don't think you're on the roll, you can go to the AEC website and check. And even better, you can actually get yourself on the roll, because for the first time, maybe these fellas could have invented the app a bit sooner for the Electoral Commission, but finally they're accepting enrolments online. So people can enrol and update their enrolment, and you can even capture your signature electronically. And these apps guys are probably saying, oh, we could have done that. And you can use it with tablets, smartphones, stylus, any of these things, or even on a PC with, I know people forget what a mouse is, but, using a mouse. So I would encourage everyone, even as just a first step, to check that you're on the roll, that you're correctly enrolled. So I didn't want to speak for too long because I want to generate some discussion. But, it is very easy. It's very easy to criticise the level of political discourse in Australia. It's particularly easy because everyone can now, more so than ever, engage in the discourse. Like, what is the show Q&A other than a series of tweets appearing at the bottom of a screen? And I was watching Sky News the other day, and the reporter, the lead political commentator, the lead presenter, was simply reading a Twitter feed. Like, if that's what qualifies as journalism, really, what have we become? And it's easy to say you're not interested because you don't like a certain politician. You might think we're moving to too much of a presidential system in Australia. But one thing I'd like to say to you, I'm sorry to say, that the quality of candidates and the quality of MPs does reflect the decisions and attitudes of the electorate. So your parliament is really what you make it. And an uninformed electorate will elect disappointing representatives, and a disengaged electorate will actually ensure that those people stay in power. And we all have the ability to improve the state of politics in this country, and that's what I think is the beauty of democracy. But it depends on whether you really want to. Whether you or your friends rail against the state of political discourse, remind yourself that you actually have the most powerful thing of all, a vote. And whenever you hear someone say, I'm not interested in politics, or I'm not voting for anyone, I'm just going to vote informal, just going to get my name crossed off, I think it's incumbent on everyone who values democracy to remind them of the lengths that some people in the world go to exercise this fundamental right. I mean, the number of people, number of hours in my life that I've spent standing on a polling booth, not only for myself but for others, handing out how to votes, to have people complain, like walk past and complain, oh, I have to vote, and it probably takes a total of, a couple of minutes, and you think, not only did people die trying to get this right, but, women, I think women have a political obligation. Women died so that women would be equal to men in having a single voice in a democracy. So we all have the ability to make a change, and I think the only thing stopping us this time, and you young people, stopping us is time, and you young people in this room, time is indeed on your side. So I would encourage you all to participate, to have an opinion, but more than that, to actually put your opinion into action. Thank you very much. Very happy to take questions, as long as they're not too hard.
Any questions?
I have a question. Where do I get the onesies online? Do I just Google onesie?
eBay.
eBay. I'm getting let off easy. It's that one.
Yes, come on.
Ah, Saran Park.
With the recent shuffle at the head of the Labour Party, how easy is it to convince your electorate or people that follow you? Your Prime Minister was Julia Gillard, now it's Kevin Rudd. How can you convincingly toe the party line when the head's just changed and suddenly you still be convincing in your delivery of your message?
Look, that's the question of the day, and I decided you hit the nail there. How can you be convincing in delivery? I'm just being honest with people when I speak to them. I agree. People must think, what is going on? What is going on? We have this happening, and you've got a right. You've got every right to think that. And I do believe that, when she was Prime Minister, I thought Julia Gillard did some real groundbreaking stuff. I think she had an excellent policy mind. She was very good to me. She was very open and was a driving force behind important policies like Australia in the Asian century, like actually stepping up and saying, our place is in this region. We need to have very strong ties with not only countries but with their people, to have an understanding of these people when they make Australia their home. It was no accident that she was the first Prime Minister to visit the Gurdwara in Glenwood. I said to her that, and I didn't realise she was going to be the first Prime Minister actually, but I simply said to her, the most popular surname in Blacktown is Singh. And I think that says a lot about, where you need to not only pay respects, but you need to demonstrate some understanding, and she did. I take my hat off to her for doing all those things. There'll be a lot of books written. There's already been a book released about it, but I think two things. Firstly, when I look back, I don't think that Julia Gillard really had a chance, considering what was thrown at her by the media in particular. To have the office of Prime Minister denigrated in the way that it was, including people actually advocating that she be killed, and these people are like top-rating broadcasters. To wake up every day, didn't matter what she said as Prime Minister, there was always a negative comment about her. I think the final straw came in the couple of weeks beforehand when the most sexist, denigrating things were, that menu that was put out at a function. Who would ever say that about President Obama and get away with it? Who would have even said it about John Howard and gotten away with it? So I don't think, in hindsight, I actually don't think she had a chance. But secondly, I don't know what it says for young women. Like, I can't with all honesty, when young people approach me and say, I want to go into politics, I can't in all honesty now say you can do anything, because you know what, maybe we can't. Maybe we can't. Maybe we can do anything, but maybe it's not all at once. But it's really caused a rethink, I believe, about politics in Australia and the role of the media. We were talking earlier, opinion polls seem to drive what's going on. In every interview I did for the last 12 months, Michelle, the latest polls, what do you say? The only poll I care about is polling data. That sort of thing, it's just, you got tired of saying it. But does anyone, other than people I was talking to, does anyone know how these polls are done? Because one of the people we were talking to assumed that it was you opt in, like you say, yes, I would like to have a say. Does anyone know how they're done? I'll tell you how they're done. You'll know how archaic this is when I explain it to you. It is run, Newspoll, which is the lead polling agency, is owned by News Limited, which is Rupert Murdoch, and they phone people at home in a number of key areas, at home. So you have to have a landline, you have to answer that landline, and you have to answer the questions that they put to you. Now, I've got a landline at home, but it's basically for my broadband. That's about it. I don't know about any of you. They don't call mobiles. And if they get to a surname, which they can't pronounce, or there's a bit of an English barrier, they hang up straight away and go on to the next call. So who do you think they're calling? What kind of demographic do you think they're calling? They're calling old white people. Old white people at home. They're not calling any Sikhs. Is anyone in this room been polled by a polling company? By News Poll? Actually by News Poll? No. So they're not calling me, they're not calling you. But so these are the people that are driving opinion polls, which are ultimately driving big political decisions. And then what do they do once they have the News Poll results? Then News Limited analyses it in their newspapers and on their TV shows. So it's this self-perpetuating piece of evidence that I don't think is reflective of all of Australian society. But you know what? Ultimately, you know, when people say the only poll that matters is polling day, for as much as a cliche it is, it's true. It is true.
You talked about, firstly I want to ask, you talked about being engaged as an electorate, and so I'd like you just to expand on that and what that kind of means, and also I guess you touched on something to do with the media and the role the media is kind of playing in how we view politics and things like that. And I guess from my personal experience, it's very hard to tell what's actually going on and what's not going on, and whether there's a truth to a lot of what's being said. As you just mentioned, News Limited is pretty much running the show in terms of giving us an opinion of this person's leading this person, and so it just becomes a bit of a farce.
I think the two issues feed one another, because like when I do a lot of cold calling, speaking to people at home, mobile offices, train stations, etc. And when you actually put the question to them, so have you thought about how you might vote at this year's election? Invariably, the answer's preceded by, well, like it's really hard. Like it's really hard to have an opinion. I don't think it's really hard to tell people, because people aren't backwards in telling you what they think, but it's really hard to bother to have an opinion. I also find then that probably my most effective form of campaigning, and I don't like this at all, is not so much engaging in debates with people about specific issues. It's more about being seen. It's the what we call high vis. It's the high vis stuff. People go, oh, I see her a lot. She must be doing something. See her a lot. She must be doing something. But in reality, the doing something stuff, people don't see. People don't see the time that goes into, even things like being a member of parliament doesn't just involve being around in the community. Well, that's a very important part of it. Being in the parliament is hard. Like because it's a hung parliament too. I would have said this, people here would have heard it before, you get picked up at 6 in the morning, you walk out of the building at 10:30. Not walk out of, your job, your office. You walk out of the building, so you don't leave that building. And indeed, it's a privilege to be doing it, but it's hard. And people don't see you doing that. There's no cameras on you while you're doing that. And with all the commentary that's in the media, and people are trying to digest so much, not only from the mainstream media, I didn't know what MSM meant 12 months ago. I didn't know there was a difference between mainstream media and the other media, So is the other media, is that the true media now? Because is the MSM so rotten? So I actually think people are exhausted trying to comprehend what's true or not, and whether rumour and innuendo and opinion is passed off as fact. I think it's actually, maybe I should have said this a bit more, I think for a lot of people it's exhausting being in the democratic system now, because you're trying to stay informed, you're trying to find things to inform your opinion. It must be exhausting. Are you exhausted?
Yeah. It's overwhelming. I mean, to be honest, it's kind of like, the more information you get thrown at you, unless you've got some sort of personal kind of stability about yourself, how are you going to make decisions?
Well, exactly. It's like, when you're researching for an essay and you don't know what political bias the author has or not. Like, if it's written well, you'll probably believe it. You'll probably believe it and rely on it. And a lot of people don't know the backgrounds. Look, 99%, and I know a few of them, 99% of journalists, you know, they've got their own sources, you know, so people their friends are feeding them stories, the exclusive stories. You know, the other 1% is, you know, Telegraph, sensationalism, you know. But yeah, it must be exhausting.
Okay. One last question.
Just quickly on that, in terms of media being very, I guess, not very informative, but more opinionated, how do you personally sort of go about your job when you know that, you know, there's going to be a certain spin on what you do, whatever you do? How do you go about that?
It's very hard. I'm always, and I've been doing a lot of national media lately. I really try not to say no to any of it. Not that people, you know, a lot of people don't watch the kind of shows I go on, but some people do. It's amazing the people that do. But the first thing I'm always conscious of is just don't stuff up. Like, you know, don't give the gotcha line, you know. So I've become overcautious, really overcautious. The only time I sort of let myself go a bit was a couple of weeks ago. I was on a Sky program, and it was the day that Julia Gillard was still Prime Minister. It was like the day before the ballot, and she was being criticised for that photo shoot where she was knitting, you know, that was going in the Women's Weekly. And I was being interviewed by this bloke who obviously doesn't read the Women's Weekly, and my opponent was this Liberal senator from South Australia who I'm sure doesn't read the Women's Weekly. I actually read the Women's Weekly. I've read it for 20 years, more than 20 years. It's the only magazine I buy. It's just a force of habit. So I got rather annoyed. I said, this is actually what the Women's Weekly publishes. This isn't news. Like, why is the story the making of the story? So I got rather animated, and I really let myself go a bit. And you can actually go. I think I've got a YouTube channel now. You can actually see it. And I got really cranky, and I thought, you know, stop this. And I just said what I thought. After I finished, I got I had a voicemail message from Christina Keneally on my phone. Yeah, he said, Michelle, I'm sitting in the Virgin Australia Lounge, just watching you, and you go, girl. You rock. And then a lady from Melbourne rang my office, total stranger, and she sent a $500 check in the mail, like saying, you know, so, you know, when you do sort of unintentionally sort of stop, I think, focusing on not making a mistake, I think you can sort of do like interesting things. But, you know, I try not to push my luck. I'm very cautious more than anything. And I've spoken for too long. Sorry, Sam.
That's right. Thank you, Michelle. Now just got Jasmine, one of our youth leaders, to say a word of thanks.
Hi Michelle, I just want to say that we really appreciate the time you take out to come to our camp, and your speeches definitely inspire everyone here to sort of show a high interest, gain a different perspective, and be engaged in politics, especially with everything that, all the changes that have happened. And on another note, I just want to say that I really admire how much you immerse yourself into our culture with the Gulab Jamun reference and all the greeting at the front. I think that was really nice because it shows how much you love your job, and that's something at a leadership camp that we can take away from that. Like, when you do love what you do, you can really achieve a lot as much as you have. So we have a little gift for you.
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you so much. Excellent.
Well done, Jasleen. That's really good. Thank you. Big hand for Jasleen too. And a big hand for Michelle Rowland. And I wish you all the very best in the upcoming elections.
Thanks very much. Thanks.
Her middle name is Score too, by the way. Okay, now I'd like to... Are you leaving?
Oh, is that all right?